Okay, so the first step today is we're going to take the chuck roast that we have here, and we're going to dry this off so that it's, you don't have to be ridiculous about this, but we just want all of that juice because we want this to sear in the pan, which I have heating up at medium heat. And we want this to just kind of brown on the outside quite heavily. And what that does is it helps keep those juices in while it's cooking. And now we're going to salt and pepper that. And you want to use, I use table salt for this because it sticks to it better. I have done it with chunkier salt, but it's just easier to do it like this. Just remember, don't stick your hand in and out of the salt if you're touching the meat. So I'm consciously not touching with my right hand here. This builds a crust on there and just adds some flavor. Just rub that in so it's sticking. Okay, and then we're going to put a couple of tablespoons of oil in the pan. I'm going to let that heat up just a little bit. Like I said, I've been heating, that's probably 3 tablespoons of oil, 2 or 3. And I'm just going to let that warm up, heat up. And you want to keep this hot enough so that you hear a nice sizzle with the meat, but you don't want to see the oil start to smoke. So we're just going to leave that for just a second. So I'm going to just, okay, so that's sizzling nicely. And I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to do this for a couple of minutes on each side. Okay, we'll let that, that's got a crust on the outside of it. I'm going to let that. As long as your oil isn't smoking, you can continue to turn it up to get the crust going, but you don't want to make it too hot or else it starts smoking. I grew up with cast iron cookware. My mother used it all the time, so I have a lot of it that I've purchased through the years because it's what I grew up with and I just love cooking on them. Okay, so I'm going to cook that, flip that. And then just, if you put a little pressure on it, helps create that crust that we're looking for. I'm going to flip that. You see that it's got some crust on there. Okay, so now I have my crock pot is heating, and I'm going to take this entire thing and pick it up and put it in the bottom of a crock pot. And you can see we've got all kinds of drippings in there, and that will be taking care of it a little bit. You can scrape some of them off if you want to, and you don't have to leave this oil in there if you don't want to, but I like it because as long as it's not burned, it gives a lot of flavor. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the onions in. And the carrots. And I'm just going to cook these until they're about 6 minutes, until they're just softened a little bit and have absorbed some of the flavor in the drippings on the bottom. Right now, all I'm doing is making sure that everything is covered with some of that deliciousness and covered in the oil so that they cook better in here. Okay, I think that's good. We've got some browning on those onions. I don't want to overcook them. And so I'm going to, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the garlic, which I have 5 or 6 cloves of garlic that I've chopped. They're not quite minced. Put that in there. And I'm going to get that, leave those in there for about 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to add a little more salt to this, stir that in. Get some nice drippings on the bottom. And so I'm going to loosen all of that up with about a cup of wine, red wine. And that'll give it the nice flavor and a nice depth of flavor. And I'm going to simmer this down until it's about half gone. That's looking beautiful. And it smells divine. Yeah, I think that's just about good. So turn the burner off. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add 2 cups of chicken broth. We're going to add 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. And then we're going to add about a cup of beef broth, which I am going to put into the can that I just took the tomato sauce out of, so that and that's about a cup. So that we get all of the tomato droppings off of there. You wouldn't want to miss any of the flavor. A teaspoon of thyme, dried. And then we've got I'm going to start with a half a teaspoon of crushed red pepper. Give it a little zing. And 3 bay leaves. And so then I'll just get this all stirred up. And I've got this on high. And if you're going to cook it on high, you're going to want to cook it for 6 to 7 hours. And if you're cooking it on high for an hour always, to get that up to temperature, and then you would go probably 11 to 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours if you're on low. We'll leave this and we'll come back in a little while, in a few hours, and test it with a fork and see how it's doing, and we'll be back. Okay, so it's been about 7.5 hours, and I'm finally happy with this. So it did go a little bit more than I anticipated, which happens sometimes. And so I am going to take this out of the crock pot and let this rest for a little while. But I wanted to show you what it looked like coming out of the crock pot and what it should look like. So if I let this go, it's going to fall, it's just going to fall apart. So I'm going to put it on this plate and I'm going to let it rest for a little while. And then we'll come back and we'll pull some of this meat off once it's rested. And the reason you rest that is so that all the juices, they're so hot right now, if you cut that, they're just all gonna splurt out over the plate and you're gonna lose all that juiciness. So we're gonna let those settle, the whole thing cool off a little bit and settle down. And so we'll be back in about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and take another look at this and see what it looks like. But this is definitely done and it's smelling so great. See you soon. Okay, so this has been resting for about a half an hour. Now the first thing you want to do is that there's a couple of strings tying this together, and the first thing you want to do is get that string off of there. So I take a pair of kitchen shears and I just pull this off. And when I was a little girl, my mother used to do this, and she would hand us a piece of string, and there was more meat on this than this, but we would gnaw the meat off, and it was like a treat. And every time I see a pot roast like this, all I want to do is gnaw on the string. This meat was quite tough throughout the day, and as it got more and more cooked, this is what you want this meat to look like. You want to be able to, you don't need to cut this meat. You want to be able to just break this apart. I'm not going to break all of it apart, but you want to be able to just put your fork in it and pull it, and then that's when you know it's done. If you stick it in when it's cooking and you can pick up the piece of meat with your fork, you are nowhere near done. And so this is perfect. I don't have to, I could take a knife, I have my knife here, but I don't even need to use it. So what I'm going to do is just take some of this meat and I'm going to just put some on the plate. This just simply pulls apart like with no effort whatsoever. It's just so tender and so delicious, and it's just so yummy. And then you've got this juice here, and there's quite a bit of fat on the top of it. So there's several ways to get this off. You can just go around the edge and just don't push the spoon down too hard. And you can get some of that fat off. You can let this cool off. Like this is for tomorrow actually. But you can let this cool off and then you can just pull it off the top. It'll just come off like it will be cold enough to just pull off. But you just take that fat and pull it off like that. But so what we want to do right now is there's all kinds of carrots and goodness in here, and you just want to get a little bit of that and put it with the meat. It's just simply delicious. And there you have it. And that's our pot roast, our classic, really, pot roast. Thank you.